Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, first off an apology if you can hear banging throughout the entirety of this episode of the show. I do apologise, but next door have got the builders in and they're making a bit of a racket, shall we say. So hopefully that won't distract us from tasting some hopefully exceptionally good whiskies this afternoon. And so, as you can see from the title page of this week's episode of the show, we're looking at some interesting whiskies from an independent bottling company called Blackadder. Now, you've probably never heard of Blackadder. You're probably going, hang on, wasn't that a series with Rowan Atkinson? And, well, yes, it was a series with Rowan Atkinson. Blackadder are an independent bottling company. They've been doing it for quite a considerable number of years in actual fact. I first encountered them and started stocking their bottlings, probably must be about a good 10 years ago now. And I must admit, I forget for the life of me why we moved on. No idea. They bottled some interesting stuff. Like all independents, there was some pretty damn good stuff and some not quite so damn good stuff, as is often the case. But generally, I mean, they've got several ranges now. They do rum, they do all sorts of different vattings and various bits and pieces. But essentially, Blackadder were known for what they call the raw cask series, which were bottled completely naturally, no filtration, and as you probably know. I don't know if you can actually see, but in the bottom of each bottle is a bit of detritus from each cask, whether it's actually from the actual cask or whether it's just a little bit of wood sprinkled in. Who knows? Yeah, it's a bit of a gimmick, I suppose, but it does kind of underline the whole ethos of Robin Tuchek and Blackadder in that all their whiskies are uncoloured, unfiltered, completely and utterly natural as natural can be. Essentially, pretty much as they come straight out of the cask, and got to be applauded for that. So a big thank you goes to Blackadder for the samples for today's tasting. They're not really that sample orientated, shall we say, but they got back in touch with me about a year or so back now and said, look, we've actually working together again, and nothing really came of that. And then I got back in touch with them again and said some samples, and they have done, and well, we're stocking Blackadder again. I mean, Peat Reek, brilliant whiskey, one of my just one of those things you just say does exactly what it says on the tin. It reeks of peat. And then there was another one, Smoking Isla, which again was a fantastic bottling, and we sold quite a fair amount of it. So if you are watching the show and lovingly remember buying some of Blackadder's whiskies from us, then obviously we've got some of them back in stock, and you're more than welcome to purchase them. So anyway. There are not very many people in the UK that do them. I think that Blackadder are more kind of geared up to the export market, and certainly they're very, very popular in sort of Scandinavia, Germany, that kind of area. And there's not very many people in the UK sort of doing their whiskies, hence why you've probably never heard of them. But anyway, hopefully I shall give you 6 damn good reasons why you should now hear about them, and why you should spend your hard-earned pennies on their stuff. So I guess I'll just introduce this afternoon's sort of lineup. She comes at night, nobody knows why. Right, okay, so like I said, Blackadder are probably more well known for their raw cask series, but like I said, they do a number of other bottlings. The first bottling is a completely new one to me, and I think they certainly wasn't in their range when we used to work with them. This is called Red Snake Raw Cask Redneck 05. Nothing like a big mouthful there, is there? This is a unknown single malt, matured in American oak, It is bottled at 61.1% and was bottled sometime this year. So that will be where we're kicking off with. The second bottling we'll be looking at is called Black Snake. This one is Black Snake Vat 6 Second Venom. This, again, an unknown single malt. Finished in ex Pedro Ximenez casks, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I think this is Solera matured. So it's basically, you know, how a Solera operates with several layers of casks all feeding down into one cask, and then you draw out a proportion of spirit or sherry generally from the Solera butt, and then refill them. As in sherry, in Jerez they call it running the scales, when they basically bring down the younger, to the younger spirit sherry into each of the preceding layers. Anyway, this, like I said, it was bottled at 59.3, and it was bottled in February of this year, so it should be fairly interesting. The third bottling we'll be looking at is the first of 4 in the Raw Cask series. This is the Raw Cask Ben Nevis. It was distilled in 1996, bottled last year at 53.3%, and is 18 years old. So that should be interesting. Now, the last 3, I did kind of think about what order am I going to taste them in, because as you can see from the colour of these, Moscatel matured, and pretty damn dark and pretty damn intense, I can tell you. So it was a question of whether I do those 2 before I do the Peat Reek, and I thought no, we'll do the Peat Reek fourth. So this is the Raw cask strength Peat Reek. Like I said, Robin seems to love large names. This is bottled at 59.6% from a Bourbon Hoggy, and was bottled. This particular bottling was bottled in August of 2015. Now, if memory serves me correct, Peat Reek used to be Kalila. Whether, of course, that still is or not, we shall endeavour to find out. And then we shall look at these two, the two English whiskies. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only current available privately bottled English whisky. And so we've got 2. Both of them were distilled in 2007, and both were fully aged in ex-Moscatel casks. Now, as you probably remember, must be about 2 years ago now, when I did an episode of the show from the distillery. I think Andrew said that they had a number of different wine casks, and certainly, if you remember, I was tasting directly out of an ex-Sauternes cask. So Moscatel is a sweet wine. It generally is made in either Portugal or Spain from the Muscat grape. It develops quite a lot of sugar, gets very, very ripe, and produces a very sweet wine. So I think you can guess what part of the characteristic might be. So basically 7 years in an ex-Moscatel cask. So we have the unpeated 7-year-old bottled at 63.2%. Bloody hell. Cask 794, distilled in October of 2007 and bottled in May of 2015. And this is its sister, the Peated English whisky. Again, like I said, wholly aged for 7 years in the Moscatel cask. Cask 789, distilled in November of 2007 and bottled in May of 2015 at 63.4%. So I have the water jug ready. Anyway, so I think this is going to be a really interesting tasting. They've got some weird and wonderful stuff to share with you guys. So let's make a start then. Right, okay, so let's kick off with the Red Snake then. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Quite raw, quite earthy, pungent. It's got some nice barley, some apricot, touch of sort of sweetish barley, sort of straw barley. I mean, sort of nosing this blind, you could have mistaken it actually for a refill sherry cask. It's got that kind of rich, sweet-ish kind of character, but the alcohol is certainly, I mean, it's 61%, and so the alcohol is quite noticeable, and it's kind of just taking the edge off that sweetness. Yeah, it's a pleasant nose. It's got, like I said, it's got some nice character to it. It's not the most complex of malts I've ever come across, but it certainly has that sort of raw feel to it. So, palate. Again, quite raw, very alcoholic. Some nice white fruit though, some barley, some citrus, a little bit of lime, lemon, really intense alcohol. I mean, that really kills the finish, which is not a surprise. Although it's got, underneath that alcohol, you can sort of feel the honey and the vanilla from the oak. I mean, it's pleasant. I mean, it's not exactly earth-shattering, it has to be said, but it's nothing wrong with it. The only big issue I have with this particular bottling is how much I would have to retail it for. And I think, if memory serves me correct, I'd probably have to retail this somewhere in the region of 62 pounds, and just not complex enough. Interesting, but just not quite complex enough. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it. I've just about saved enough to do so, and we'll see what diluting it does. So see what the nose does now then, shall we? That's opened it up a little bit. There's a lot more citrus now. It's juicy. It's got that sort of lovely kind of juicy citrus fruit character. A little bit of orange. Certainly lightened it. It's a little bit of perfume, white fruits, and not so much oak now. The oak is kind of like sort of slunked off a bit. Slunked off a bit. What am I talking about? Slinked off a bit. Out. That's better. It's kind of filled out. It's kind of white fruits, apricot, barley, bit of citrus, pleasant length. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice whiskey. It's just, if I don't really, I mean, if I could have sold that for sort of, I don't know, about no more than say 45 quid, then I think that would have been about right for what it actually is. But I think it's sort of 60 odd quid. I just think that's just too expensive. So yeah, great whiskey. But let's move on. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Black Snake. I mean, I love all this. I mean, I love the labels. And the labels are excellent. I love all the kind of tattoo-y kind of connotations and all that kind of stuff. And but anyway, we're here to talk about the whiskey. Let's see what the nose gives us. Lightly treacly, quite grapey. Certainly seems to sort of have the PX stamp on it. Quite light in actual fact. It's not as weighty as you might think for a PX finish. So I'm guessing the Solera is probably made up of effectively refilled sherry butts, but the fact that they've always got spirit in them is going to kind of leach out. There's a little bit of vanilla, some spices, some licorice, treacle, quite a bit of treacle. Again, it has a sort of a very raw cask kind of character to it. It's a very natural nose. It's certainly not sort of one of those kind of soft and confected kind of sherry noses. It's certainly got a bit of raw and edgy character, which is quite pleasant. Pardon? really chocolatey, coffeed. Again, the alcohol is kind of masking the progression of it. It's got a little bit of spice, a little bit of treacle, dried fruits. Again, it has that kind of raw kind of character to it. Some lovely coffee tannins now coming back on the aftertaste. I mean, yeah, it's pleasant. Again, I forget what I'd have to retail this for, but you know, I would have to retail it for more than what I really think it's worth. But that's just life. I mean, I've discounted a number of whiskies over the years because of that fact, that you know, that I didn't think that they were worth what I actually had to retail them for. Nothing to do with the actual quality. But anyway, let's see what putting a drop of water does for it. It's kind of, it's gone very soft now. It's not really giving up an awful lot at all. It's kind of, yes, there's some sort of sherry notes there. Yes, there's a bit of spice, a bit of barley now possibly. I mean, it's not homogeneous, but it's kind of lost some of the character and the intensity, although getting a bit more kind of earthy kind of coffee notes now. Palate. Again, it's kind of, yeah, it tastes like a sherry cask whiskey. It's softened it up to the point where there's no real light and shade. I mean, it is nice, it's slightly coffeed, a little bit of treacle, dried grape, you know, but it's not really exciting me, shall we say. I mean, as you know, it takes an awful lot for a sherry cask to really excite me, and yeah, it's fine, it's pleasant, but you know, it's yeah. Next, please. Right, moving on to the Ben Nevis. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Now that is nice. Again, it has that lovely raw, earthy kind of character. There's a bit of sour fruit, dusty, mature oak, a little bit of sort of classic Ben Nevis doughy, malty character. I mean, that is a lovely nose. That is really impressive. It's just a shame that this particular bottling has all gone. A little bit of barley, bit of white flowers, honey, lovely oak. There's a little bit of almost kind of tea leafy kind of tannins. Really, really complex, really impressive. Absolutely gorgeous nose, this. Palate. That is a lovely mouthful. Big, broad, malty, doughy, bready, classic kind of Ben Nevis. The oak is quite tight, quite tannic, but there's a lot of sweet malt and barley and honey to kind of like just sort of offset that. It's got a lovely, intense citric finish. And some lovely mature American oak. Absolutely fantastic. Don't think that actually needs any water. I'm not going to bother putting any water with it. I mean, yes, I know it's over 50%, but I just love that intensity, and I love that finish, even though it is a little bit short, but because of the alcohol. But I can still taste that that American oak. I mean, that's very, very good. Right, bit of peat reek then. And I tell you what, I can smell the reek from here. I haven't even got to put my nose anywhere near this glass, and you can go, yeah, I can smell peat. So let's stick the nose in the glass and see. No, I would say that this is definitely Caol. It has that sort of slightly oily, slightly high-toned, grassy kind of nose that I often find with Caol, and probably end up finding out that it's not Caol at all. But I'd be amazed if it actually, if it is something else. I mean, it's possible it could be Lefroy. There's a little bit of medicinal note. There's a bit of coffee. Oh, and did I say there was a bit of peat there? There's a bit of peat there. Really intense, wonderful sort of lightly iodine-y, slightly medicinal, just peat reek, just great, you know, absolutely wonderful. I mean, obviously, if you don't like peated malts, you're not going to love this, but if you do, this is fantastic stuff. Palate. Again, the palate kind of reinforces the thought that it is Caol, with that sort of crisp fruit, but light oiliness as well. A little bit of tar, a bit of medicinal peat, a bit of earthy peat, but not too medicinal. So it certainly doesn't sort of come across like Lefroy, for argument's sake. Lightly salted. I'm guessing that sort of these casks have probably spent most of their life on the mainland rather than sort of actually on Islay, but it has a nice saltiness at the finish, and some lovely sweet peat and sweet barley kind of coming through right on the aftertaste. That's very, very good. Let's put a little drop of water with it, although I kind of like the intensity of it at cask strength. I mean, admittedly, it's nearly 60%, and so it's, I would guess, fairly young spirit, but it has a lovely rounded character, and certainly, again, it kind of seems to intimate that it is Caol, because Caol can be, you know, really, really good at youngish ages, you know, 6-8 years old. Oh, that's nice now. Really juicy, really sort of succulent. Not quite so sort of peated now, and often is the case when you put a drop of water with peated cask strength whiskies. That is absolutely fantastic. A little bit of white licorice. Palate. That's sweetened quite nicely, actually. I'm getting a little bit of oak now coming through, and that's the thing with Caol. You often tend to find that you don't get a lot of oak with them. I'm guessing that sort of, you know, they tend to use predominantly refill hoggies. Lovely sweetness. Even the peat has got a sort of a sugar coating, shall we say. Touch of violets and bit of coffee right on the finish. That is really complex. That is lovely, either with or without water. So yeah, fantastic stuff. Really good. Right, time to taste these monsters then. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Subtle that is not, is the first words that spring to mind. Really grapey, dried sweet grapes, apricot, earth. This is really raw and really intense, but the sweetness of the muscatel kind of really balances that out. I think if this was didn't have that kind of raw edge to it, it would be just way sweet and grapey. I mean, there's a bit of coffee. It's theoretically on paper. This is not really my thing, but because I must admit I'm not really getting much in the way of distillery character. The balance is all skewed towards the cask. Not surprised considering it's spent all its life in a Moscatel cask, but you know, there's something strangely appealing. It has to be said. It's almost kind of like a fetishist kind of appeal, shall we say? That sort of slightly masochistic edge that probably got to my character. Yeah, really grapey, big cask character. I actually read Serge's tasting notes that were on his Whisky Fun website, and he really slated this. He did not like this at all, and I must admit, from sort of tasting it, my tasting notes were way different to his. I don't know what he'd been on that particular day, but yeah, I mean, it's unsubtle. It's kind of, you know, almost a case of, well, what do you expect? 7 years, light spirit, Moscatel cask. I must admit, I kind of just wondered. Palate. Whoa, my God, that's mouth-watering on the finish. Pretty much like the nose. It's all sort of, you know, the dried grapes, dried apricot, earth, a little bit of tar, a little bit of treacle. Yeah, cask, all cask, but really intense, really raw, and God, that alcohol gives it one hell of a kick. It's almost kind of like stag-like in that intensity, and I feel inside my cheeks are still tingling with that raw alcohol character. Let's put a little drop of water with it, probably more than that, a little drop of water with it, and see if that kind of calms it down a little bit, or does anything different to it. Not much change to the nose, it has to be said. It's still pretty much all cask, still quite raw, quite herbal now in actual fact. It's got a sort of almost kind of rye-like herbal character. I mean, obviously this has got no rye in it. I mean, I know that that David certainly did an experimental mash of rye and barley and so on and so forth, but this is all obviously all coming from the cask. Again, that sort of real herbal kind of character. Bit of almost kind of malt biscuits and Weetabix, that kind of thing. Really intense. Palate. Big, juicy, mouth-filling. Again, all Moscatel, sort of dried fruits, cask, bit of wood. Still a bit dry on the finish, but obviously not quite so alcoholic. If you love, if you love big sherry monsters, you know, this is just completely up your street. It's in that kind of same kind of ballpark, although it's obviously not a sherry cask. Yeah, I kind of like it in a kind of weird way, if you see what I mean. It's interesting how many Moscatel cask, excuse me, matured whiskies, kind of repeating on me there. Kind of do you come across it every day? You don't really. So it's interesting from that point of view. It has to be said. So it's not cheap, but I really think it's kind of worth the price tag. If that's kind of your thing. So yeah, like that. Right, and finally, yes, another Glencairn has bit the dust, as you can see. So it's the substitute Glenmorangie glass, or Glenmorangie branded glass is back out. So let's see what the nose gives us on this then. I think this works slightly better. Again, I mean, it is all big, winey, dried grape, muscatel-y, honey, but the peat is kind of giving some kind of counterbalance, if you see what I mean. It's quite earthy, a little bit of almost medicinal notes. I mean, I do remember when having a chat with David and asking about the peated levels for this peated, he basically said, well, we buy it in as heavily peated as we can possibly get. So I'm guessing this it must be somewhere around about the 50 parts per million. It's got a real peated intensity, a real lovely character. I mean, it's almost kind of in the sort of, not quite optimal, but it's in that sort of style, you know, the sort of big wood, the big peat, you know, and it's one of those kind of love-hate whiskies, you know. You're either going to love this or you hate it, you know. And I love it. I mean, you know, again, like I said, it kind of almost goes against the grain of everything that I like about whiskey. You know, I go bang on about balance and all this kind of thing, and well, you know, here I am going eulogising about a completely and utterly unbalanced whiskey. You know, must be mad. But my God, that's kind of sucking my cheeks in. And then add the peat in there, that sort of raw, dark toffee, coffee, earthy, slightly medicinal peat, and it's kind of, oh my God, you know, it's just, this is no shrinking violet. This is an intense whiskey. This is a real wake me up kind of dram. I mean, that's just like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? I mean, obviously it doesn't have the complexity of George T. Stagg, but it certainly has the intensity thereof. So let's see what a little drop of water does then, shall we? Again, like the previous bottling, it sweetens. The peat is lessened, it's more kind of smoky and soft. Again, licoricey, grapey, etc., etc., casky, you know, palate. Again, quite dry, again quite herbal. It seems that the water is bringing out that sort of real herbal rye-like intensity. Still quite coffeed. The peat is a little softer, it's sweeter. Oh, yeah, that's great, I love it. Right, okay, so let's sum this little tasting up then. Well, pretty good, I think. Really intriguing and certainly different. Can't say I've quite had a tasting like this for quite some time. So, red snake and black snake. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the quality was fairly good. You know, can't argue with that. The only thing I argue with is what I would have to retail them for, and I personally just don't believe they've got the complexity to go with the price tag. It's probably the biggest issue with whiskey. It has to be said. You know, the cost of the damn stuff sometimes. Yeah, I mean, we all know the price of whiskey is going up, the price of barley's going up, the price of casks are going up, etc., etc. And you know, it's it's all about value for money, in my opinion. And when you think about, you know, what whiskies retail for, and you think, yeah, that's certainly worth 60 quid, that's worth 70 quid, that's worth 100 quid. You know, when you've got whiskies like that, it's very difficult to sort of like, you know, stock a whiskey that you don't think is worth the price tag, because you're not going to go for it, you're not going to sell it. So it's just like, well, you know, there's no real point in stocking it. Anyway, I'm not being negative. I mean, this is just, you know, this is just a purely, you know, financial kind of view, really. You know, it's no criticism of the quality of the whiskey. It's just a criticism of what I'm being charged for it, you know. So, you know, and whiskey, like I guess any product to a certain extent, is very, very price sensitive. The Ben Nevis, brilliant, absolutely gorgeous Ben Nevis. It's just a real shame that that particular bottling has gone, but yeah, that's the thing with single casks. That's what I love about them, the turnover, the fact that, you know, one day you'll have well, one particular interesting bottling and the next day you won't have it. You know, it's just the way things go, shall we say. Cask strength, or raw cask peat Reek, yeah, just as good as I remember it to be. And I'm just so glad that we've got that back on the shelves. I mean, I can't remember what I'm actually sticking it out at, but if you go on the website, you'll certainly find out, or pop into the shop. And yeah, if it sounds like it's your thing, and then yeah, you won't be disappointed. And the two English whiskies, well, they're mad, absolutely barking. I mean, you know, it's kind of like, you know, there's certain whiskies that you sort of taste and you go, what the hell am I tasting? You know, you've got things like the George T. Stag, you've got things like the Ben Ryack Solstice, you've got things like these two, you've got things like Octomore, and you know, the whiskey world would be, you know, a far less interesting place without these weird and wonderful beasties, shall we say. Yes, they're fairly expensive. I think the unpeated is something like 75 quid and the peated is 79 quid. So it's got to be a type of whiskey that you're going to really love. There's no point in buying it, shall we say, on a bit of a whim. If you love this kind of whiskey, then you know you're gonna freak for it. So so yeah, there you have it. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll at least sort of like check out some of the bottlings from Blackadder that we've got currently in stock, or failing that, just get a bottle from wherever you can. If you're on the continent, this is probably actually, you've probably got more choice in actual fact. I know a lot of you guys kind of view the show that live in Europe, and often sort of mention the fact that a lot of the bottlings that I tasted is not available in your particular countries. Well, this is probably one of those episodes where the reverse is actually true. You've probably got more Blackadder bottlings available in Denmark or Germany than you have in this country. So so get yourself a bottle, that's all I can say. So good dramming, good afternoon.